Hello everyone. Now it's time to understand what is a class and what is the object in OOP. Okay. So class is a blueprint for creating objects. So just like the example I gave you earlier, God created the concept of a human first, and then from that concept, you and I were created. So that concept I can call a blueprint or a class, and our own existence, like yourself or myself, I can call it the object of that class. I hope you understand that clearly. In terms of Python, basically, class is just a blueprint for creating objects. And classes can be built in or custom defined. I'll get to this very soon. I can also call it an object is an instance of a class, right? So you can use the word object and instance interchangeably when we talk in Python. Okay, so let's move forward. Let me first tell you that since you are aware of what are strings, what are integer and dictionary and all other data types in Python, you would be amazed to know that these all themselves are the classes that are used in Python. Okay, so let me just show it to you. So I'll open up a debugger and I'll run the code. Now I'll move forward. You can see right now I'm going to print str. Okay, so you can see what have we printed. It is class str, right? So basically the data type of string that we use in Python, this itself is a class used by Python. Okay, so let's move forward. What happens if I do this, right? So if I do this, you can see that I have s0 as empty string, right? So if I move forward, now I have s1 as Shamil. So basically when we present these two brackets, it means that we are creating an object from a class. So this is a class, right? When I want to create an object from a class, I'll just use these two brackets. That means that object from that class is now created, right? So this is just a concept and this is an object. Okay, this is a blueprint and this is an instance. So object and instance, we can use the term interchangeably, and now you would be amazed to know that these objects and classes you have already been using when you were working with Python. Okay, so another method of using this that you have always been using is this. This is just a shorthand literal for it. Okay, now what happens when I print this? So you can see s1 class is class string, just like I showed you earlier. We can see the class string like that. Now I'll explain you what exactly happens and how Python actually prints the class, right? So whenever a class is called, it is always called from a module. In short term, the file that I am running, I can say that this is a module that Python uses in which the class exists, right? But str, this thing, this over here, this is written by Python developers, Python creators mainly, and this is actually available in their built-in module, right? That is why we don't see here this kind of module syntax. So if I print this, you can see that the module of this string is built-in. Similarly, we are gonna see the same thing because that is also a string class, and with this I can show it to you that the object actually exists in some space in the memory. So if I print it like this, you can see that these two objects that we created, they exist in some sort of memory space in Python. So when we create an object, obviously you and I, we are human beings, we need some space to exist. Similarly, when we create an object, they need some space in our computer to exist, and this is their home address. You can consider it as their home address. Okay, this is the entire talk about the built-in classes that are available in Python. Right now we are going to move into our custom classes and we are going to use this syntax. So when we want to create a class, right, we have to write this class and then the name of the class. Right now I'm not doing any logic here, I'm just trying to create a class so that you can get the concept very easily. Okay, so when I move forward like this, you can see that we now have a class created over here, right? So what happens when I do this? So just like I explained you earlier, when I use these two brackets before the class, it means I am now creating an object, and then this object is being assigned to u1 variable over here. Okay, so let me execute this, and you can see this over here, u1 is equal to main.user. Now what I told you, that main is our module, right? So in Python terminology, main means the current file that we are executing. So this main refers to class dash objects.py, right? And this dot user is the class that we just created. And it is saying that the object from this class has been created at this particular address. Now I hope you get the idea how it works. Okay, so I'll just for another example I'll show you another one. So now what happens when I executed this line, another object from the same class was executed, but now this was stored in u2 variable. So that means that we created a concept first. Now from that concept we can create as many objects as we want. Similarly, how God created the concept of a human being first, and then he created all of us out of that particular concept. Okay, now similar to that previous one, I just want to see the type of it. Okay, so if I do this, I can print it out over here. You can see u1 class is main.user. The reason I showed you earlier for string we don't see it normally is because it is already in their built-in module. That's why we don't see it. But normally whenever you are gonna create a class in some file, you are gonna see the name of that module and then user. But if you are executing it from the same file, you are gonna see main over here. So this is a very simple difference over there. Okay, so moving forward, let's see what it prints over here. It's just showing that the module of the user is main, our current file. And this is the same thing. Now we know what the address of our two variable is, but we have already seen it in our debugger. So let's move forward. So this is basically about the built-in classes and the custom classes. Okay, now I hope you get the general idea of how it is. Now let's do some sort of instance checks. Okay, I'll just move it over here. Okay, so there we have in Python isinstance method where we can verify that the object we created belongs to that particular class or not. This is very widely used in Python where we want to check if a certain object is created from a certain class or not. Okay, so we can use this particular method. Just like I told you earlier that we can use the word object and instance interchangeably in Python in most times. So when I print this, what do you think is gonna print out? So in general programming terminology, whenever you see is before any word, it means it is gonna print some sort of a boolean value. So obviously we know that s1 is from a string, so it's gonna print true. Let's move forward over here. See, it's true. So when I execute this line, what's gonna happen? Is s1 object created from int class? What do you think about it? I think no, right? So it's gonna print out false. Now let's talk about our personal stuff, that stuff that we created in this particular lecture. Okay, so is u1 an instance of user? The answer I think is yes. So moving forward, so this was a pretty basic class of what the class is and what the object is and how you can actually see what goes on when you run the debugger in Python. I hope it helped you understand. Thank you.